Subscribe to LearnCap and hit the bell icon to get notified.
Hello friends, welcome to the amendment lectures on GST as applicable for CA Intermediate for May 2021 examinations. Friends, the amendments which have happened from 1st of May 2020 till 31st of October 2020. All these amendments, all this set of changes are going to be discussed in this lecture series. Friends, the amendments are very few. These are like jackpots. You can expect a direct question from these amendments. Friends, the general instructions before starting. For LearnCap students, the lectures are already updated in the portal. The portal is containing the updated lectures, but still I would strongly recommend you, I would strictly advise you to go through all these amendment lectures, because in a consolidated manner you could find the amendments at a single place. It would be easier for you to recollect and revise. Amendment notes are attached. You can download the amendment notes available in the description link. What is going to be the approach? Friends, the approach of our lectures, as usual, it is going to be what was the position prior to amendment, why there was a need for the amendment, and what is the effect of the amendment. All these three aspects we are going to discuss in this lecture series. So friends, for those who wants to place an order of the CA final book which is available, or of the CA intermediate book which is available, the book has been co-authored by me along with CA Vishal Jain. So the description link is available over here. Those who want, they can place their orders over this link. So now friends, this is a corrigendum which is there. This is for LearnCap students. This communication is specifically for LearnCap students. Now friends, as regards as section 10 is concerned, in section 10 2A, the special composition scheme for service providers. Now friends, in the LearnCap lectures, what was being discussed, the rate of tax which is applicable for special composition scheme for service providers under 10 subsection 2A, the rate of tax is 3% of the turnover of supplies of goods and services in the state or union territory. Now friends, in the LearnCap lectures, it was mentioned it is 3% of the turnover of taxable supplies of goods or services in the state or union territory. Friends, it is not so. Earlier, it was taxable supplies of goods and services, but on the very next day, a corrigendum was issued, and that corrigendum removed the words taxable. It removed the words taxable. So friends, the position, the rate of tax for a composition taxable person who is paying taxes under 10(2)(a), it is 3% of turnover of supplies of goods and services in the state or union territory. So you can please update them. In the lectures, we had discussed that it is 3% of turnover of taxable supplies of goods. Friends, currently the lectures are updated. This error also has been rectified. However, for those who did not notice this change, this is a specific instruction which is being given to LearnCap students. 10 subsection 2A, the rate of tax is 3% of turnover of supplies of goods and services in the state or union territory. It does not contain the word taxable. What difference does it make, friends? The difference is, had this word taxable been there, it means that even a person who is there under 10(2)(a, he need not pay taxes on exempt supplies. But friends, this word taxable is not there. The wordings are 3% of turnover of supplies of goods and services in the state or union territory. So friends, 10(2)(a person also needs to pay taxes on exempt supplies. Friends, this change is already updated in the LearnCap portal. This specific instruction I am giving them in case if any person or in case if any student has missed out on this change. Friends, this amendment which we are going to discuss is because of reorganization which has happened between the states and union territories of India. Friends, prior to reorganization, we had India comprised of 29 states and 7 union territories. Friends, out of these 7 union territories, 5 union territories were without legislature and 2 union territories, that is Delhi and Puducherry, were with legislature. So now friends, if you have a look into Article 366 Clause 26B of the Constitution of India, it stated that state with reference to Article 246A, 268, 269, 269A and Article 279A, which means in simple terms for the purpose of GST. For the purpose of GST, state includes a union territory with legislature. So friends, prior to reorganization which happened, India comprised of, for the purpose of GST, India comprised of 29 plus 2 union territories with legislature. So it comprised of 31 states. it comprised of 31 states, that is 29 plus 2 union territories with legislature and 5 union territories. Now friends, after the reorganization took place, what was the reorganization? The state of Jammu and Kashmir was reorganized into Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir and also a Union Territory of Ladakh. So Jammu and Kashmir state, we could say in local terms, it was split into two, which is the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir and the Union Territory of Ladakh. Now friends, as regards as the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir is concerned, it is a Union Territory with legislature. It is a Union Territory with legislature. As regards as the Union Territory of Ladakh is concerned, it is a Union Territory without legislature. So now friends, just imagine, prior to reorganization, India comprised of 29 states and 7 union territories. And 7 union territories I'm talking about at a gross level. Now friends, there's a subtraction in one state, in the count of one state, and there is an increase. And there is an increase in 2 union territories. So therefore friends, effectively what happens is there should be 28 states, because from 29, one state, that is the state of Jammu and Kashmir, was reorganized and it was split into 2 union territories. So therefore we say from 29 states it becomes 28 states. And naturally friends, as regards as union territories is concerned, from 7 it should go to 9. I repeat, from 7, the count of union territories, from 7 it should increase to 9, because now there are 2 more union territories, that is Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. But friends, here the reason why it is mentioned is 8 is because apart from this, another reorganization took place, which was, first there were 2 separate union territories in the name of Dadra and Nagar Haveli and Daman and Diu. There were 2 separate union territories. So now friends, they both are merged and now they are one single union territory, which is Dadra and Nagar Haveli and Daman and Diu. It is one single union territory. So friends, at a gross level, what has happened is union territories, earlier it was 7 and plus it should be 2. That is the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir and the Union Territory of Ladakh, and again minus 1. What is that minus 1? Dadra and Nagar Haveli and Daman and Diu. Daman and Diu was a separate union territory. Now it is being merged with Dadra and Nagar Haveli. So therefore friends, as regards as union territory count is concerned, it is 7 plus 2 minus 1, which stands at 8. Now friends, out of these 8 union territories, 5 union territories are without legislative assembly and 3 union territories are with legislative assembly. So which are those 3 union territories which are with legislative assembly? It is Delhi, it is Puducherry and it is Jammu and Kashmir. So friends, now again, for the purpose of GST, how many states do you have? Friends, you have 28 plus 3, because these are 3 union territories with legislative assembly, Jammu and Kashmir, Delhi and Puducherry. So now friends, again for the purpose of GST, states happens to be 28 plus 3, which is 31, and union territories remains at 5. So friends, at a gross level, is there any change? If you look into our discussion earlier, we had stated that prior to reorganization also there were 31 states and 5 union territories. After reorganization also there are 31 states and 5 union territories. At the gross level it remains the same. At the gross level, 31 states and 5 union territories were before also. Now also it is 31 states and 5 union territories. But internally, is there a change? The answer is yes, internally there is a change. If you ask the breakup of 31, now it is 28 plus 3. Earlier the breakup of 31 was 29 plus 2. Earlier it was 29 plus 2. Friends, what was the change? For the purpose of GST, Jammu and Kashmir was a state before also and now also, because Jammu and Kashmir is a union territory with legislature. So technically for the purpose of GST, Jammu and Kashmir was a state before also, Jammu and Kashmir is a state now also. Now friends, as regards as union territory is concerned, the count still remains 5, because although there is an increment in the count of union territory as far as Ladakh is concerned, but however, there were 2 separate union territories which are now merged into one. That is, your Daman and Diu is merged with Dadra and Nagar Haveli. So therefore, the count of union territory again at a gross level it remains at 5. So friends, I am sure you are thorough with this. As of now, how many states do we have for the purpose of GST? It is 31. How many union territories do we have? It is 5. What is the breakup of 31? 28 states and 3 union territories with legislative assembly. Friends, one small question before we end up this part of the discussion. Let's suppose, friends, is a person who's supplying goods from Daman and Diu to Dadra and Nagar Haveli. There's a person who's supplying goods from Daman and Diu to Dadra and Nagar Haveli. Friends, prior to amendment, this supply would have been called as an interstate supply. Prior to amendment, this supply would have been called as an interstate supply because now, friends, prior to amendment, it was two different union territories. So, friends, as we know of the location of supplier and the place of supplies in two different union territories, then that happens to be an interstate supply. However, friends, let's take the very same example in post-amendment scenario. Post-amendment scenario, if a person is supplying goods from Daman and Diu to Dadra and Nagar Haveli, will it be called as an interstate supply? Friends, the answer is no. Although geographically they are located at two different places. Geographically, Daman and Diu and Dadra and Nagar Haveli are located differently, but however, friends, they are treated as the same union territory. Now, friends, the location of supplier and the place of supply happens to be within the same union territory. So, friends, post-amendment, this supply will be called as an intrastate supply. The supply will not be called as an interstate supply. It will be called as an intrastate supply because now, friends, after amendment, this Daman and Diu has been merged with Dadra and Nagar Haveli. So, therefore, they become one union territory and this supply would be an intrastate supply. Next, friends, there is a clarification with respect to an entry which is that reverse charge mechanism. It's about directorial services. Now, friends, let's have a look at the entry first. Services supplied by a director of a company or a body corporate to the said company or body corporate. Who is the service provider? The service provider is the director of a company or a body corporate. Who is the recipient? The service recipient is the company or the body corporate which is located in the taxable territory. So, friends, in this case, the taxes needs to be paid by the body corporate or the company which is located in the taxable territory under reverse charge mechanism. Now, friends, there could be a natural confusion which arises that what if the director of a company happens to be the employee of the company? Should the company still pay GST under reverse charge mechanism? The confusion arises because in schedule number 3, there's a para which tells that services supplied by the employee to the employer. Services supplied by the employee to the employer in the course of employment is neither a supply of goods nor a supply of services. Now, friends, the question comes, if a director happens to be an employee of the organization, is the organization or is the company still liable to pay GST under reverse charge mechanism? Naturally, you know the answer. The answer is no. Here, reverse charge would not apply, friends, because either forward charge or reverse charge to apply, first the transaction has to qualify itself to be a supply as per section 7. As per section 7, it has to be a supply. Only then the next question would arise as to who should pay GST. If it is under notification 13/2017, the service recipient would pay. Otherwise, obviously, the service provider is going to pay. Now, friends, so therefore, either under forward charge or under reverse charge, the taxes to be paid, first the transaction has to qualify itself to be a supply. Now, friends, when the services are supplied by an employee to the employer, naturally it's a schedule 3 transaction which is neither a supply of goods nor a supply of services. So, therefore, it doesn't qualify itself to be a supply. So, the question of paying taxes under forward charge or under reverse charge does not arise at all. So, friends, this very same thing the circular also has clarified that if the director happens to be an employee of the organization, it is a schedule 3 transaction. If the director is not acting in the capacity of the employee of the organization, then in that case it is not a schedule 3 transaction and it would qualify to get attracted under reverse charge mechanism. So, friends, the remuneration which is paid to the director, the circular number 140/10/2020, the remuneration which is paid to the director, if the employer and employee relationship does not exist, if the employer and employee relationship does not exist, the transaction would get qualified to be taxed under reverse charge mechanism. Let's suppose as an independent director who is being paid sitting fees. Is there any employer and employee relationship? The answer is no. Would it get taxed under reverse charge mechanism? The answer is yes, it would get taxed under reverse charge mechanism. Now, friends, there could be a certain case where the director happens to be an employee of the organization. The director, let's suppose he's a whole-time director, he happens to be an employee of the organization, and also he's supplying certain services in his independent capacity, in the capacity of director. Let's suppose he also happens to be an engineer and is supplying technical consultancy services, for which he is charging some amount of money to the company. Now friends, is he an employee of the organization? The answer is yes. He is an employee of the organization. Is he paid salary? The answer is yes. He is paid salary. Over and above salary, is he also being paid any other amount? Is he also being paid any other amount for certain services which he is providing, wherein he is not in the capacity, there is no relationship of employee and employer? The answer is yes. Let's suppose in our example, he happens to be an engineer and is giving technical consultancy services, for which he is charging a separate amount. So friends, in this case, the circular clarifies, if employer and employee relationship exists, if employer and employee relationship exists, then you have to ask, is there any dual capacity? That means he is acting as an employee also and is acting as an independent person also. So friends, if there is any dual capacity, if there is no dual capacity, which means he is acting only in the capacity as an employee of the organization, then naturally it is a Schedule 3 transaction. The question of forward charge or reverse charge doesn't arise at all. However friends, if there is any dual capacity, to the extent of salary which is being paid, wherein he is an employee of the organization, for which TDS might be deducted under section 192 of the Income Tax Act, which means there is an employer and employee relationship. TDS is being deducted for the salary which is being paid. For that part of money which is being paid to the director, it is a Schedule 3 transaction. For other services which is rendering not in the capacity of employee of the organization, there if the TDS, let's suppose if it is being deducted under section 194J for professional services which is being provided, then that is not Schedule 3 transaction. It would get taxed under reverse charge mechanism. The company needs to pay GST under reverse charge mechanism. So friends, what is this circular trying to tell you? The circular is trying to tell you whatever is the remuneration which is paid to the director. Friends, please be very careful with the word which I am using it over here, rather which I would say the circular is using. It is remuneration which is paid to the directors. Remuneration which is paid to the directors. If employer and employee relationship does not exist, reverse charge mechanism. If it is existing, ask further one more question. Is there any dual capacity? If there is no dual capacity, which means he is only, whatever amount he is receiving, he is only receiving it as an employee of the organization. In that case, it is a Schedule 3 transaction. If there is any dual capacity, which means he is receiving certain amounts, that part of the amount wherein he is acting as an employee of the organization is a Schedule 3 transaction, no reverse charge mechanism. That part of the remuneration, I repeat again, the wordings which are used by the circular is remuneration. That part of the remuneration wherein he is not an employee of the organization, for which TDS is deducted under section 194J of the Income Tax Act, that would get attracted. The taxes needs to be paid under reverse charge mechanism. Now friends, this is what the circular has clarified. However friends, the circular has not yet clarified one more aspect. The circular has not yet clarified another aspect. This I am discussing purely from academic point of view, so that you are able to appreciate the word remuneration which is used in the circular. Now friends, let's suppose the director is also having an immovable property. The director of an organization, let's suppose he is an employee of the company, he is also having an immovable property which is giving it on rent to the company, for which the company is paying rent. Now friends, this rent which is being paid by the company, is this rent also liable to be taxed under reverse charge mechanism is the question. I repeat the question friends, there is a director of the company who is an employee of the organization. He is also having an immovable property. He is giving this immovable property on rent to the company. Now this rent which is being paid by the company, should the company pay GST under reverse charge mechanism? Now friends, first let's have a look at the bare wordings of this notification which is being used. Friends, this directorial services which is being mentioned, it is only for the purpose of ease of reference. This directorial services is not used in the bare notification. The notification nowhere uses the word directorial services. Let's have a look at the notification which tells you, the entry tells you services which are supplied by a director of a company or a body corporate to the said company or the body corporate. It doesn't say directorial services provided. It simply tells you services supplied by a director of a company or body corporate to the said company or body corporate. Who's the service provider? The director. Who's the service recipient? The company or body corporate. So these services will be liable to be taxed under reverse charge mechanism. Now friends, had this notification used the wordings directorial services, naturally this immovable property rent which is being paid by the company would not get attracted under reverse charge mechanism. But the notification simply tells you services which are supplied by the director. Now friends, is this services which are supplied by the director? I am only talking with respect to the rent which is being received by this director. Are the services supplied by the director? Is he having an immovable property which is giving on rent to the company? The answer is yes. Are these services supplied by the director? Yes. Are these services received by the company or body corporate? Yes. Is it liable to be taxed under reverse charge mechanism? Now friends, before we conclude into this, is the circular clarifying any aspect of this? The answer is no. The circular is not clarifying because the circular is only focusing on the word remuneration. The remuneration which is paid to the director. If any employer-employee relationship exists, Schedule 3. If it does not exist, RCM. But the clarification is with respect to what? The clarification is with respect to remuneration which is paid to the director. Now friends, in our example, can you call rent as remuneration? Can you call the word rent as remuneration paid to the director? The answer is no. So friends, in this case, the circular is not touching that aspect. The circular is not touching that aspect wherein some amounts are paid other than remuneration. Now friends, in this case, there are two schools of thought. This is a highly debatable issue. There are two schools of thought. This has got nothing to do with your examination. This is purely from academic point of view. I just wanted to appreciate the word remuneration. The circular is clarifying only with respect to remuneration. Any amount which is paid other than remuneration, it is still as an open debate. Now friends, here one school of thought tells you that since the notification doesn't restrict itself, since the notification does not restrict itself to directorial services, it simply tells you services supplied by the director. In that case, it is very wide to cover all the services which are supplied by the director. To cover all the services which are supplied by the director to the body corporate, other than those transactions which are getting under Schedule 3, all other services which are supplied by the director to the body corporate would be taxed under reverse charge mechanism because the notification doesn't restrict itself to directorial services. Another school of thought which tells you that here friends, as regards as this renting of immovable property is concerned, the person who is let out the immovable property is not a director. It is not in the capacity of director who has let out the immovable property. Here he is the landlord of the immovable property. I repeat again friends, the second school of thought tells you that the notification, although it doesn't tell you directorial services, but still it tells you services supplied by a director. In this case, it is not services supplied by a director, it is services supplied by a landlord to a tenant. So here he is not acting in the capacity of a director, he is acting in the capacity of a landlord. So here this transaction would not get covered under reverse charge mechanism. So friends, I just wanted you to appreciate the word called as remuneration. Is there any conclusion which I am giving to this example, what we have discussed at the later point of time? The answer is no. I am not concluding anything because this point is highly debatable. In my personal view, in this case also, this would not get attracted under reverse charge mechanism because here he happens to be a landlord and he is not acting in the capacity of a director. Friends, one small question before we end up this part of the discussion. Let's suppose friends is a person who is supplying goods from Daman and Diu to Dadra and Nagar Haveli. There is a person who is supplying goods from Daman and Diu to Dadra and Nagar Haveli. Friends, prior to amendment, this supply would have been called as an interstate supply. Prior to amendment, this supply would have been called as an interstate supply because now friends, prior to amendment, it was two different union territories. So friends, as we know of the location of supplier and the place of supplies in two different union territories, then that happens to be an interstate supply. However, friends, let's take the very same example in post-amendment scenario. Post-amendment scenario, if a person is supplying goods from Daman and Diu to Dadra and Nagar Haveli, will it be called as an interstate supply? Friends, the answer is no. Although geographically they are located at two different places. Geographically, Daman and Diu and Dadra and Nagar Haveli are located differently, but however, friends, they are treated as the same union territory. Now, friends, the location of supplier and the place of supply happens to be within the same union territory. So, friends, post-amendment, this supply will be called as an intrastate supply. The supply will not be called as an interstate supply. It will be called as an intrastate supply because now, friends, after amendment, this Daman and Diu has been merged with Dadra and Nagar Haveli. So, therefore, they become one union territory and this supply would be an intrastate supply.
Subscribe to LearnCap and hit the bell icon to get notified.